I died on my 48th birthday, alone in a hospital bed that smelled of bleach and broken dreams. The fluorescent lights above me flickered like dying stars, casting shadows that danced across the peeling paint of the ceiling. Through the doorway, I could hear the nurses laughing at their station. Something about someone's dating app disaster. Their joy felt obscene against the backdrop of my death. The heart monitor beeped slower, 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 each beep feeling like it took more effort than the last. No one had come to visit me. Not my parents, who I'd supported financially for 30 years. Not my younger sister, Melissa, the brilliant doctor whose entire education I'd funded with my own hands, my own youth, my own stolen future. Not a single friend, because I'd never had time to make real friends. Every moment of my life had been consumed by work, by survival, by the desperate scramble to keep my family afloat while drowning myself. Just me, dying of a stress-induced heart attack in a public hospital because I couldn't afford anything better. All my money, every single cent I'd scraped together, working since I was 14 years old, had gone to them. And where were they now? Melissa was probably at some medical conference in Paris. Mom had mentioned it last month when she called asking for money to fix her roof. Again, the third time in 5 years. I'd sent the money, of course. I always sent the money. What else was I going to do with it? I lived in a studio apartment with black mold creeping up the bathroom walls. I ate ramen most nights. I worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford health insurance that would have caught this heart condition before it killed me. But Melissa had a beautiful house in the suburbs. Mom and Dad had their comfortable retirement. They had everything they'd ever wanted, and I had nothing. The heart monitor's beep stretched into a long, flat tone that seemed to go on forever. My last thought wasn't peaceful, it wasn't acceptance or enlightenment or any of that bullshit people talk about. It was rage. Pure, crystallized, burning rage at every sacrifice I'd made, every dream I'd surrendered, every time I'd said yes when I should have said fuck you. Then, nothing. A void so complete it was like I'd never existed at all. Then, everything. I gasped awake in my childhood bedroom, my 14-year-old body shooting upright in bed like I'd been electrocuted. The pink curtains I hadn't seen in 34 years hung limp in the morning light. The poster of that boy band I'd pretended to love because Melissa loved them stared down at me with their frozen smiles. The crack in the ceiling that looked like a bird in flight. My hands. I stared at my hands. Small, smooth, uncalloused, without the scars from years of factory work and restaurant burns and cleaning chemical damage. The arthritis that had plagued me for the last decade was gone. My back didn't ache, my knees didn't crack when I moved. I was 14 years old. No, I whispered to the empty room, then louder. No, 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 no. The door slammed open hard enough to bounce off the wall. My mother stood there, the same disappointed expression I'd seen for most of my life already etched into her 40-something face. In my previous life, I'd thought she looked tired from working so hard to provide for us. Now I saw it for what it really was: resentment, disgust, the look of someone forced to deal with an obligation she'd never wanted. Why are you screaming? Her voice was sharp, annoyed. You'll wake Melissa. You know she needs her rest. She has that science competition tomorrow. Of course, the science competition. I remembered this now, the memory flooding back with crystal clarity. Melissa would win first place. Mom and Dad would be so proud. They'd take her out for a celebratory dinner at the nice restaurant downtown. I wouldn't be invited. They'd bring me back leftovers in a styrofoam container, already cold. Get up, Mom said, crossing her arms. We need to talk. Family meeting in the kitchen in 10 minutes. She left without waiting for a response, leaving my door wide open like my privacy didn't matter. It never had. I sat there on my narrow twin bed, so much smaller than I remembered, and tried to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. People didn't just wake up in their teenage bodies with all their memories intact. This was insane. This was impossible. But my body knew it was real. My young lungs breathed easily, without the wheeze that had developed from years of working in poorly ventilated spaces. My heart beat strong and steady, not the irregular flutter that had killed me. This was real. I was 14 years old again, and I knew exactly what came next. I knew that in approximately 10 minutes, my parents would sit me down at the kitchen table and explain with absolute conviction in their righteousness why I needed to drop out of school and get a job at Mr. Peterson's factory. They wouldn't frame it as a request. They wouldn't ask my opinion. They would simply tell me that this was happening and they'd expect me to accept it because family takes care of family. Melissa has so much potential, Dad would say, his voice grave and serious like he was delivering important news about national security. You're not really academic anyway, Mom would add, as if my B+ average meant I was stupid, instead of just exhausted from doing all the household chores while Melissa studied. It's just for a few years, they'd promise, lying through their teeth. Just until Melissa finishes medical school. Medical school, 8 years of undergraduate and medical education. Except it wouldn't be just 8 years, would it? Because then there'd be her residency, and then she'd need help with the down payment on a house. And then there'd be her wedding. And then. But here's what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know. I remembered everything, every single day of the next 34 years. I knew that Melissa would get her medical degree, marry a man named Tom Winters, who seemed charming, but was actually a financial disaster, and never pay me back a single dollar of the hundreds of thousands I'd funneled to her over the decades. I knew that Mom and Dad would keep taking and taking until I was a hollow shell of a person, working 3 jobs to keep them comfortable while I lived in squalor. I knew that Dad would hit me exactly 7 more times over the next 4 years before I moved out, each time claiming I'd provoked him with my ungrateful attitude. I knew that Mom would tell me I was selfish and lazy every time I dared to express exhaustion or ask for help. I knew that the factory I was about to be sent to would go bankrupt in 3 years, leaving me unemployed with no high school diploma and no prospects. I knew that I'd spend the next 3 decades in a spiral of poverty and exploitation that would eventually kill me. But I also knew something else. Something beautiful and terrible and perfect. I knew exactly which stocks would explode. I knew that a small online bookstore called Amazon was about to revolutionize retail. I knew that a company called Google was going to dominate the internet. I knew about Apple's comeback, about Netflix destroying Blockbuster, about Tesla and SpaceX and Bitcoin and every single financial opportunity that I'd watched slip by in my previous life while I was too busy working minimum wage jobs to afford a computer, let alone investments. And I knew the law. Specifically, I knew that at 14, I couldn't legally be forced to drop out of school. That if I reported my parents for child labor exploitation and physical abuse, I could be removed from their home. That there were scholarships, programs, foster systems, ways out that I'd never known existed because I'd been too tired, too beaten down, too thoroughly convinced of my own worthlessness to look for them. This time would be different. This time I would burn their plans to the ground. I got dressed slowly, deliberately. Not the nice clothes. Those were all Melissa's hand-me-downs anyway, things she'd grown tired of. I wore my oldest jeans and a t-shirt that was starting to fray at the hem. In a few hours, I'd be leaving this house forever. There was no point in dressing up for my own execution. The kitchen table was exactly as I remembered it. Scarred wood that Mom had bought at a garage sale. Mismatched chairs, the smell of cheap coffee and cheaper dreams. Dad sat at the head of the table trying to look authoritative. Mom stood by the counter, her arms crossed in that defensive posture she always adopted when she knew she was doing something wrong but refused to admit it. Melissa sat in her usual seat, the good chair by the window where the morning light made her look angelic. She was 11 years old, small for her age, with big brown eyes that everyone said made her look innocent and sweet. Right now, those eyes were fixed on her plate of eggs and bacon, real bacon, not the turkey substitute I usually got. And she was very carefully not looking at me. She knew. Even at 11, she knew what was about to happen, and she was going to let it. "Sit down, Emma," Dad said, gesturing to the chair across from Melissa. The chair with the wobbly leg, the chair I'd sat in for every meal my entire childhood while Melissa got the good one. Not anymore. I sat in Dad's chair instead. "Emma?" Mom's voice was shocked. "That's your father's seat." Not anymore," I said calmly. "That's fun. If we're having a family meeting, I deserve an equal seat at the table." Dad's face turned red, that particular shade of crimson that meant he was about 2 seconds away from violence. You ungrateful little. Careful, I interrupted, my voice cold and steady in a way that made him pause. I'm recording this conversation on my phone. Every word. So choose yours very carefully. I wasn't actually recording anything. My phone was a cheap prepaid flip phone that could barely send texts, but they didn't know that. Mom and Dad by pause exchanged glances, and I saw the first flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. Good. Let them be uncertain. Let them feel even a fraction of the fear they'd spent years instilling in me. We need to discuss your future, Mom began, trying to regain control of the conversation. She came and sat down at the table, taking the chair with the wobbly leg. Your father and I have been talking, and we think it's time you start contributing more to the family. I already contribute, I said. I do all the dishes, most of the laundry, I clean the bathrooms, I mow the lawn, I babysit Melissa when you go out. What more do you want? We need you to get a job, Dad said bluntly. A real job. Mr. Peterson down at the factory is willing to hire you. Full-time hours, minimum wage. It's a good opportunity. I'm 14. That's illegal. Mr. Peterson doesn't care about that, Mom said dismissively. Lots of kids work at the factory. It's good, honest work. It's child labor exploitation and it's illegal, I repeated, emphasizing each word. And I'm not doing it. Melissa's head snapped up, her eyes wide. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. In the original timeline, I'd cried and begged, but ultimately given in. But that Emma was dead. She'd died at 48, alone and bitter, and she'd been reborn as something harder. You don't have a choice, Dad said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, quiet tone. You live under our roof, you follow our rules. Then I'll leave. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Mom laughed, but it was nervous, uncertain. Don't be ridiculous. You're 14. You can't just leave. Watch me. I stood up, pushing the chair back. I'm going to school. When I get there, I'm going to talk to the guidance counselor, Mrs. Chen. I'm going to tell her that you're trying to force me to drop out and work illegally. I'm going to show her the bruises from last week when Dad grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks. I pulled up my sleeve, revealing the yellowing bruises that I'd forgotten about in my previous life but were now clearly visible. And then I'm going to request removal from this home for child abuse and exploitation. You wouldn't dare, Mom whispered, but her face had gone white. Why wouldn't I? What do I have to lose? You're already planning to throw away my future for Melissa's benefit. At least this way, I get to choose my own path. I looked directly at Melissa, who was staring at me with something between horror and fascination. Good luck with medical school, Melissa. I hope it's worth it. I walked out of the kitchen, grabbed my backpack from my room, making sure to take the few things that actually mattered to me, like the teddy bear Grandma had given me before she died and the one photo I had of myself where I actually looked happy, and headed for the front door. Emma, wait! Mom ran after me, grabbing my shoulder. Please, let's talk about this. We can work something out. No, I shrugged off her hand. You made your choice. You chose Melissa over me. You always have. And I'm done pretending that's okay. We haven't chosen anyone over anyone. Mom's voice was getting shrill now, panicked. We're just trying to do what's best for the family. You're trying to do what's best for Melissa, I corrected. The family is just your excuse. If you actually cared about the family, you'd find a way to support both your daughters. You'd get a job yourself, Mom. You'd ask Dad to work overtime. You'd cut expenses or take out loans or do any of the 1,000 things that actual parents do when they want to help their kids. But instead, you decided the easiest solution was to sacrifice me. Well, I'm not sacrificing myself. Not for you, not for Melissa, not for anyone. Dad appeared in the hallway behind Mom, and for a moment I thought he was going to hit me. His fist was actually clenched, raised slightly, but then he saw me looking at his hand, saw me noting it, and he slowly lowered it. If you walk out that door, you're not our daughter anymore, he said, trying one last time to assert control. In my previous life, those words would have shattered me. The threat of abandonment, of losing my family, would have been enough to make me stay and accept my fate. But I'd already lost them. I'd lost them the moment they decided I was worth less than Melissa. I'd just been too young and scared to admit it before. Promise? I asked, and walked out. The morning air was crisp and cool, and I stood on the front porch for a moment, breathing it in. Free. For the first time in my life, both lives, I was actually free. I could hear shouting from inside the house, mom and dad arguing, Melissa crying. Let them cry, let them panic, let them figure out what to do now that their plan had fallen apart. I had my own plan, and it started with Mrs. Chen, the walk to Wipe Alma. School took 20 minutes. I used the time to organize my thoughts to prepare for what came next. Mrs. Chen was a good person. I knew that from my previous life, though I'd never interacted with her much beyond the occasional academic check-in. But I'd watched her help other kids, seen her go to bat for students who needed it. She'd helped Jamie Rodriguez escape his alcoholic father. She'd gotten Maria Santos into a better foster home when her first placement turned abusive. She'd even helped Marcus Thompson get emancipated at 16 so he could escape his controlling parents. She would help me. I knew she would. The school was already bustling with students when I arrived, everyone rushing to lockers and first period classes. I went straight to the guidance office and knocked on Mrs. Chen's door. "Come in!" Her voice was warm, welcoming. I opened the door to find her sitting at her desk, surrounded by files and coffee cups. She was younger than I remembered, 40 maybe, with kind eyes and the slightly frazzled look of someone who cared too much about their job to maintain proper work-life balance. "Emma Hart, right?" She smiled at me. "Have a seat. What can I do for you?" I sat down and took a deep breath. "I need help. My parents are trying to force me to drop out of school and work at Peterson's factory full-time. When I refused, my father got violent." I showed her my arm. "I need to be removed from their home." Mrs. Chen's expression shifted from friendly to intensely focused in an instant. "Tell me everything." I told her, not everything. I couldn't explain the rebirth, the 34 years of memories from a future that no longer existed. But I told her about the favoritism, about Melissa's education being prioritized over mine, about the physical abuse, about the plan to ship me off to illegal child labor. I was calm, factual, precise. No hysterics, no exaggeration, just the truth. She listened to everything, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Emma," she said finally, what you're describing is serious abuse and neglect. I'm going to have to report this to Child Protective Services. Do you understand what that means?" "Yes, it means I'll be removed from the home and placed in foster care." "It might mean that, yes. Or it might mean your parents get a visit from CPS and a warning, and you have to go back home. I want you to be prepared for both possibilities." "I'm not going back there," I said firmly. "Even if CPS doesn't remove me immediately, I'm not going back. I'll run away if I have to." Mrs. Chen studied me for a long moment. "You're very calm about this." "I'm tired," I said, which was true in ways she couldn't possibly understand. I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter. I'd rather be in the system than in that house." She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'm going to make some calls. You're going to stay here in my office while I do. Don't leave. Don't talk to anyone. Just sit tight. Can you do that?" "Yes." The next few hours were a blur of social workers, police officers, questions, statements, and examinations. They photographed my bruises. They asked me to describe the physical abuse in detail, how many times, where he hit me, whether mom ever intervened. She didn't. They asked about the plan to send me to the factory, and I gave them Mr. Peterson's name and address. By lunchtime, I was in the back of a social worker's car, heading to a temporary foster placement while they investigated my claims. "You did the right thing," the social worker, a tired-looking woman named Patricia, told me. "It takes a lot of courage to ask for help." I didn't feel courageous. I felt calculating. Because this wasn't about courage or bravery or standing up for myself, though it was those things too. This was about survival. This was about making sure that I didn't repeat the mistakes of my first life. This was about taking control of my future before someone else could steal it from me again. The temporary placement was with an older couple, the Johnsons, who mostly left me alone in their spare bedroom while CPS did their investigation. I didn't mind. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out my next moves. Because the hard part wasn't getting away from my parents. The hard part was building something better in the aftermath. The investigation moved surprisingly quickly. Mr. Peterson, when questioned, admitted to employing several minors at his factory, including having had discussions with my father about hiring me. The bruises on my arm matched my testimony perfectly, and when CPS visited my home and interviewed Melissa separately from our parents, she apparently confirmed the favoritism and the plan to make me drop out, though she tried to downplay it. My parents were put on a CPS watch list. They weren't prosecuted, there wasn't quite enough evidence for criminal charges, but I was permanently removed from their custody. They were allowed supervised visits if I wanted them. I didn't want them. Within 3 weeks, I was placed with the Hartleys, a permanent foster placement with the possibility of adoption if things worked out well. The Hartleys were everything my birth family wasn't. Mr. Hartley, James, was a high school history teacher with a gentle sense of humor and an endless patience for teenage drama. Mrs. Hartley, Sarah, was a nurse who worked night shifts at the hospital but always made time to have breakfast with her family before going to bed. They were in their mid-40s, had been trying to have children for years before accepting that it wasn't going to happen, and had turned to fostering instead. They'd had 8 foster kids over the years, all of whom still kept in touch with them. That's how I knew they were the real deal. House rules are simple, Sarah told me on my first day, sitting with me at the kitchen table, a solid oak table with matching chairs, all in good condition. School comes first always. Your education is the priority. Chores are divided equally among everyone in the house, and yes, that includes James and me. We all live here. We all contribute. Your room is your private space. We won't enter without permission except in emergencies. You're allowed to decorate it however you want within reason. No holes in the walls, but posters and paint are fine. And the most important rule, James added, smiling kindly, is that you never, ever have to talk about your past if you don't want to. If you want to share, we're here to listen. But you're not required to perform trauma for us. You're just required to be yourself. I started crying. I couldn't help it. These were the first genuinely kind words anyone had spoken to me in longer than I could remember. Not just this life, but the previous one too. By the time I'd escaped my parents' house in the original timeline, I'd been so beaten down that I couldn't recognize kindness when it was offered. Sarah came around the table and hugged me, and I let myself be held just for a moment, just long enough to remember what safety felt like. But I couldn't rest. I couldn't just be a normal teenager going to school and doing homework and worrying about dating and college. I had a limited window of opportunity, and I needed to use it wisely. With the Hartleys' permission, I got a weekend job at a local cafe called The Daily Grind. It was legal, limited hours, minimum wage plus tips. The owner, a woman named Carol who wore too much jewelry and laughed too loud, liked that I was a hard worker who didn't complain. Every cent I earned went into a savings account. The Hartleys thought it was admirable, this 14-year-old working to save money for college. They didn't ask why I seemed almost obsessed with accumulating cash. They probably thought it was trauma-related, a need for security after growing up in an unstable home. They weren't wrong, but it was more than that. I needed seed money. I needed enough to start investing when I turned 18 and could open my own trading account. 4 years felt like an eternity, but I'd learned patience in my first life. I could wait 4 years if it meant setting myself up for the next 50. At school, I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that surprised my teachers. Suddenly, Emma Hart, the mediocre B-plus student, was getting straight A's. My hand shot up in every class. I devoured extra credit assignments. I joined academic clubs and competitions. "Emma, this is wonderful," my English teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, said after I turned in an essay that was probably college-level work. "But I have to ask, is everything okay? This is quite a change from your work last semester." I gave her my practiced smile, the one I'd perfected over years of retail work in my previous life. "I'm in a better home situation now. I can focus on school." It was true, but it was also incomplete. The real truth was that I'd already learned most of this material once before, and relearning it was easy when you were approaching it with an adult's understanding and a teenager's brain plasticity. I wasn't smarter than my classmates. I just had a 34-year head start. Teachers started calling me gifted. Colleges started sending recruitment letters when I was just 15, which was unusual but not unheard of. The Hartleys were proud, taking me out to celebrate each achievement like it mattered. And it did matter. Each A, each award, each academic competition I won was another piece of evidence that I wasn't the worthless, non-academic child my parents had written me off as. I was brilliant. I'd always been brilliant. They'd just never given me the chance to prove it. But academics weren't my real goal. They were just the foundation. My real goal was in the computer lab, where I spent every lunch period researching companies, tracking stock prices, memorizing market patterns that I already knew would pay off. That's where I met David Zhang. David was a year older than me, a sophomore to my freshman status, and he was the stereotypical computer nerd. Thick glasses, Star Wars t-shirts, a laptop covered in coding stickers. He ate lunch in the computer lab every day, working on some project or another, and he always sat in the back corner where he thought no one would bother him. I started sitting near him, not saying anything at first, just working on my own research. After a week, he glanced over at my screen. Stock market? He sounded curious, not judgmental. Aren't you a little young for that? Aren't you a little young to be coding what looks like a social media platform? I countered. He blinked, surprised that I'd noticed, then grinned. Fair point. What are you researching? Companies I think are going to be big. Amazon, Google, Apple. I'm tracking their patterns, trying to predict growth. That's actually really cool. He pulled his chair closer. Can I see? We spent the rest of lunch talking about tech companies, market trends, and the future of the internet. David was brilliant in that specific, narrow way that very smart people sometimes are. He understood technology intuitively, could see how innovations would cascade and combine. But he didn't understand people or markets or money. I understood all three. We started eating lunch together every day. Then we started hanging out after school. David would show me his code, explain his projects, and I would offer suggestions about user interface and market positioning. I would show him my stock research, and he would help me understand the technology that drove the companies I was tracking. You're really smart, he said one day, 4 months into our friendship. We were in his garage, which his parents had let him convert into a workshop. Computer parts and half-finished projects covered every surface. Like scary smart. Why do you care so much about the stock market? I'd prepared for this question. My parents didn't think I was worth investing in. I'm going to prove them wrong by becoming rich enough that they regret it for the rest of their lives. David laughed, thinking I was joking, but his expression sobered when he realized I was serious. That's actually kind of badass. Thanks. I pulled up my investment wish list on his computer. The problem is I can't actually invest until I'm 18. I'm just building a strategy for when I can. What if you didn't have to wait? David asked slowly. I have about $5,000 for my bar mitzvah and some birthday money. My parents set up a custodial investment account for me. I could invest it. My heart started racing. This was it. This was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. You'd trust me with your money? You've been right about every prediction you've made so far. Last week you said that tech company, what was it, NVIDIA? Was going to jump after their earnings report. It did, exactly like you said. He shrugged. Plus, what else am I going to do with the money? Let it sit in a savings account earning nothing? David, if we do this, you have to promise me something. You have to follow my advice exactly. No second guessing, no emotional decisions. I'll tell you when to buy and when to sell, and you have to trust me. He held out his hand. Deal. But if we lose it all, you have to tell me how you're really doing this, because nobody's this good at predictions without some kind of edge. I shook his hand, feeling the weight of the promise. Deal. We started small. I had David buy Amazon stock when it was trading at around $50 per share. He bought 100 shares for $5,000. Over the next 6 months, I watched that investment like a hawk, tracking every movement. When the stock hit $75, I had him sell half his position, taking out his initial $5,000 plus a profit of $2,500. 50% return in 6 months? David stared at the numbers on his screen. Emma, that's insane. Professional investors don't get those kinds of returns. Reinvest the profit, I told him. And the original 5,000? That's yours again. Pure profit from here on out. We reinvested in Google, which was about to go public, then in Apple, which everyone thought was dying but was about to launch the iPod and revolutionize personal electronics, then in Netflix, which was still primarily a DVD by mail service but was going to pivot to streaming. David's account grew. 5,000 became 15,000. 15 became 50. By the time I was 16 and he was 17, his account had over $200,000 in it, and he looked at me like I was some kind of financial oracle. How do you do it? He asked one night. We were in his garage again, reviewing the portfolio. How do you know which companies are going to succeed? I'd been dreading this question. I couldn't tell him the truth. He'd think I was insane. But I couldn't keep lying either, not when our partnership was built on trust. I have a really good sense for patterns, I said carefully, and I read everything. Tech blogs, financial news, industry reports. I look at what problems exist and figure out which companies are solving them in ways that people will actually use. Amazon makes shopping easier. Google makes information accessible. Apple makes technology beautiful and intuitive. Netflix gives people convenience. It's not magic. It's just seeing what people want before they know they want it. It was true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. David seemed satisfied with the answer. Well, whatever it is, don't stop, he said, grinning. At this rate, I'll be a millionaire before I graduate college. He would be. We both would be. But I couldn't tell him that yet. At home with the Hartleys, life settled into a comfortable routine. Sarah worked nights and slept during the day, but she always woke up for dinner so we could eat together as a family. James helped me with homework, even though I rarely needed it, and told terrible dad jokes that somehow always made me laugh. They asked if I wanted to pursue adoption after I'd been with them for a year. You don't have to decide right away, Sarah said gently. We were sitting in the living room, just the three of us. But we wanted you to know that we'd be honored if you wanted to become a Hartley officially. I thought about it. Emma Hart versus Emma Hartley. One name carried all the pain of my previous life. The other represented a future I was building. I'd like that, I said. But can I keep Hart as a middle name, Emma Hart Hartley? James smiled. That's perfect. The adoption was finalized 2 months later. I was 15 years old, and for the first time in either of my lives, I had parents who actually wanted me. I still didn't contact my birth family. Not Melissa, not Mom, not Dad. As far as I was concerned, they'd made their choice, and I'd made mine. We were done. But I heard things. Small-town gossip. Facebook posts from people who knew them. I couldn't help checking occasionally just to see how their plan was working out without me to fund it. It wasn't working out well. Melissa had gotten into a decent state university with a partial scholarship, but she still needed loans for the rest. Without my financial support, my parents couldn't help her much. Mom had finally gotten a job as a receptionist, and Dad had picked up overtime at his factory job, but it wasn't enough. Melissa was working part-time at a grocery store while taking pre-med classes, and according to her sparse Facebook posts, she was struggling with the workload. Good. Mom posted passive-aggressive things on Facebook about ungrateful children and how family was supposed to stick together no matter what. Several of her friends commented supportively, not knowing the full story. I could have told them. I could have posted my side, shared the bruise photos, explained exactly why I'd left, but I didn't. I had better things to do than argue with strangers on the internet. I had a future to build. Junior year, I took the SAT and scored a perfect 1,600. Not because I was a genius, but because I'd seen the test before in my previous life when I'd considered going back to school in my 30s. I'd taken a prep course back then, memorized the patterns, learned the strategies. Now I just applied that knowledge with a teenager's sharp memory. Colleges started recruiting me hard. Harvard, Yale, MIT, Stanford. They all sent letters, emails, representatives to talk to me about their programs. The Hartleys were ecstatic. "We're so proud of you," Sarah said, tears in her eyes as she looked at the acceptance letter from MIT. "You can go anywhere you want." I wanted MIT. James was already planning to attend. He'd gotten early acceptance to their computer science program, and MIT was where the real money was made, where tech geniuses networked and built empires. We both accepted. Full scholarships for both of us. We'd go to college together, continue our partnership, and start building something bigger. But first, I had to finish high school. Senior year was strange. I was simultaneously the most successful student in my class, valedictorian, perfect GPA, multiple academic awards, and completely disconnected from the normal teenage experience. While my classmates worried about prom dates and graduation parties, I was planning investment strategies and researching tech startups. David noticed. "You should try to have fun sometimes," he said. "We're only young once." I almost laughed at the irony. I'm having plenty of fun. I'm building an empire. "You're 17. You should be worried about prom, not stock portfolios." I went to prom and I caught myself. "I'm not interested in prom." He gave me a searching look but didn't push. That was one of the things I appreciated about David. He knew when to leave things alone. Graduation day arrived. The Hartleys came, of course, with a banner and flowers and more enthusiasm than the actual occasion warranted. David's parents were there too, beaming with pride at their genius son. My birth family wasn't there. I hadn't invited them, and they hadn't reached out to ask. As far as I knew, they'd accepted that I was gone from their lives. Melissa was finishing her sophomore year of college, still struggling with pre-med courses and debt. She'd broken up with her high school boyfriend, not Tom. She wouldn't meet him for another few years, and seemed miserable based on her social media presence. I felt nothing looking at her photos. No satisfaction, no pity, nothing. She was a stranger who happened to share my DNA. "Emma Hart Hartley," the principal called my name. I walked across the stage, accepted my diploma and the various academic awards I'd won, and smiled for the cameras. The Hartleys cheered embarrassingly loud. This should have been the happiest moment of my life. In my previous timeline, I'd never graduated high school. I'd never even gotten close. And here I was, valedictorian, heading to MIT in the fall with a full scholarship. But all I could think about was the next step. College was just another tool. MIT was just another means to an end. The end was power, wealth, security, everything I'd lacked in my first life. The summer before college, I worked full-time at the Daily Grind. Carol had given me more hours and a raise, making me a shift supervisor at just 17. My savings account had grown to $15,000. Not much compared to David's portfolio, but it was mine, earned through my own labor. The Hartleys didn't charge me rent or ask me to contribute to household expenses, but I insisted on paying for my own things, my clothes, my school supplies, my personal items. They'd given me so much already, I wouldn't take more than necessary. "You don't have to do this," Sarah said when I handed her money for groceries I'd eaten. "You're our daughter. We take care of you." "I know, but I want to contribute, please." She accepted the money with a soft smile, and I saw pride in her eyes. She thought I was learning responsibility, developing a strong work ethic. She had no idea I'd been working since I was 14 in my previous life, or that this work ethic had been beaten into me through decades of necessity. MIT was everything I'd hoped for and more. The campus buzzed with intellectual energy, with brilliant minds pushing boundaries and challenging conventions. David and I got an apartment together off campus, cheaper than dorms, and it gave us space to work on our own projects without resident advisors breathing down our necks. I majored in business and finance. David majored in computer science. We were the perfect team. He understood how to build technology, and I understood how to sell it and scale it. But more importantly, I understood when to invest. The moment I turned 18, I opened my own brokerage account. I transferred my $15,000 in savings and immediately started investing based on the timeline I knew. David let me manage his account too, which was now worth almost $500,000. "I trust you completely," he said, signing the power of attorney documents that gave me control. "Just make us both rich." "I will." I bought Tesla stock when it was under $10 per share. I bought Bitcoin when it was under $500. I bought shares in companies that I knew would explode: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Uber, Airbnb. I was conservative with David's money, spreading it across established companies. With my own smaller account, I took bigger risks, buying positions in companies that seemed insane, but that I knew would pay off. It was almost unfair. I had 3 decades of market knowledge compressed into my 18-year-old brain. I knew which companies would succeed, which would fail, when to buy, when to sell. I knew about market crashes before they happened and could position myself to profit from them. Within a year, my 15,000 had grown to 60,000. David's account had crossed the $1 million threshold. By the time we were sophomores, I was worth over 200,000 and David was worth 3 million. This is insane, he kept saying, staring at the portfolio values. We're college students. We shouldn't have this kind of money. Do you want me to stop? I asked. Hell no. I feel like we're cheating somehow. We weren't cheating. We were just prepared. But I couldn't explain that without sounding insane. College life was strange for someone with adult memories and teenage energy. My classmates worried about exams and dating and career prospects. I worried about portfolio diversification and long-term wealth preservation. I went to classes, did the work, got straight A's, but my heart wasn't in it. Education was important, but it was just foundation. The real work was happening in the market. But I forced myself to engage socially, at least a little. I'd learned in my previous life that isolation led to depression, and depression led to poor decision-making. So I made friends, surface-level friendships mostly, with classmates who thought I was smart but intense. I joined the finance club and the entrepreneurship society. I networked with professors who might be useful later. And I started dating. Her name was Alexandra Petrova, and she was a junior studying architecture. We met in the library during finals week of my sophomore year. I was reviewing market reports, and she was working on a building design, and somehow we started talking about the philosophy of structure, both in buildings and in financial systems. Money is just another form of architecture, she said, her accent still thick from her Russian childhood. You build structures to support weight, to create space, to serve purpose. Investments are the same. I fell in love immediately. Alexandra was brilliant, beautiful, and had no patience for bullshit. She'd grown up poor in Moscow, immigrated to the US with her mother when she was 12, and worked her way through school on scholarships and part-time jobs. She understood struggle in a way my classmates didn't, but she didn't know about the rebirth. Nobody did except me. We dated for 6 months before I told her I was wealthy. She'd known I was good with money. I always seemed to have cash for dates, never stressed about expenses, but she didn't know the extent of it. I have about $2 million in investments, I told her over dinner at a nice restaurant I'd suggested. I'm very good at stock market prediction. She set down her fork and stared at me. You have $2 million. Yes. And you're 20 years old. Yes. Emma, that's not normal. That's... How? I told you, I'm very good at predictions. I pulled up my portfolio on my phone, showed her the numbers. I can see patterns that other people miss. I know which companies are going to succeed. She was quiet for a long moment, processing. You're not doing anything illegal? No, I promise. It's all legal, documented, taxed appropriately. I'm just very, very good at this. Show me, she said. Spent the next 2 hours explaining my strategies, showing her past trades, walking her through my reasoning. She asked smart questions, challenging my logic, trying to find the holes. There weren't any, not because my logic was perfect, but because I was working from the future knowledge. Finally, she leaned back in her chair and laughed. You're either a genius or the luckiest person alive. Maybe both, I said, smiling. Okay, I believe you, but Emma, you need to be careful. This kind of success attracts attention. Not all of it will be good. She was right, of course, but I was already being careful. I had a good accountant, paid my taxes scrupulously, and kept my investment strategies vague when people asked. Pattern recognition and market research was usually enough to satisfy curiosity without revealing anything real. Alexandra and I moved in together in our junior year. She was practical about money in a way I appreciated. She didn't expect me to pay for everything just because I had more, and she insisted on contributing equally to rent and expenses from her part-time income. I won't be dependent on anyone, she said firmly. Not even you. Especially not you, because I love you and I won't let money ruin that. I understood that on a level most 21-year-olds couldn't. I'd spent 30 years in my previous life being financially dependent, being used, being trapped by economic necessity. I would never do that to someone I loved. David graduated a year ahead of me and immediately started working on his social media platform full-time. He'd been developing it as a side project for years, a platform that was part Twitter, part Reddit, part something entirely new. I'd helped him refine the concept, guided him away from the mistakes I knew other platforms would make. I'm calling it Nexus, he said, showing me the beta version. It's about connecting people through shared interests and real conversations, not just likes and follows. It's good, I said honestly. It was better than good. In my previous life, David's platform had eventually competed with Facebook for market dominance. You need funding, though. This is going to take resources to scale. I know. I'm meeting with some venture capital firms next week. Don't take the first offer you get. And David, I looked at him seriously. I said this. Whatever you do, maintain controlling interest. Don't let investors push you out of your own company. I won't, he hesitated. Emma, I want you to be a partner, officially. You've been guiding this from the beginning. You deserve equity. 10%, I said immediately, in exchange for my advisory role and some capital investment. I'll put in $500,000. Deal. We shook on it, and I became a founding partner in what would eventually become a billion-dollar company. All because I remembered the future and knew how to position myself for it. I graduated from MIT at 22, summa cum laude, with a degree in business and finance and job offers from every major investment bank. I turned them all down. Why? My academic advisor asked, baffled. These are incredible opportunities. Goldman Sachs alone is offering you. I don't need a job, I said simply. I'm already wealthy, and I'm going to be wealthier. I'm going to work for myself. I'd graduated with over $5 million in my personal account. David's portfolio, which I still manage, was worth over $20 million. We'd made so much money that we'd had to hire a wealth management firm just to handle the complexity of it all. But I wasn't done. Not even close. The next 5 years were a blur of investments, acquisitions, and strategic positioning. I started a venture capital firm, Heart Capital, that invested specifically in female-founded companies and companies that aligned with my values. I made angel investments in startups I knew would succeed. I bought real estate in cities I knew would gentrify. I was playing the long game with perfect information, and I was winning. David's company, Nexus, exploded in popularity. Within 3 years, it had 100 million users. Within 5, it had 500 million. The venture capital firms that had initially invested were seeing 1,000% returns. And then came the acquisition offer. $3 billion, David said, showing me the offer letter. We were in my office. I'd bought a building in Boston's financial district and occupied the top floor. They want to buy Nexus for $3 billion. Take it, I said immediately. You don't want to think about it. David, take the money. You've built something incredible, but the market is getting saturated. Facebook is coming. Other platforms are launching. If you wait too long, the offer will shrink. Take the $3 billion, let them handle the scaling, and use your share to start something new. He trusted me. He always trusted me. He sold Nexus for $3 billion, keeping 20% of the company as part of the deal. His immediate payout was $2.4 billion. My 10% share translated to $300 million. At 27 years old, I was worth over $300 million. And I'd never worked a traditional job in my life, the media noticed. Forbes ran an article, The 20-something Who Beat Wall Street at Its Own Game. Business Insider wrote about my investment firm and its focus on women-led businesses. I was asked to speak at conferences, appear on financial news programs, write articles about my strategies. I said yes to some, no to most. I didn't want to be a celebrity. I wanted to be free. And at 28 years old, I achieved complete financial freedom. My portfolio was generating more in passive income than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I'd invested in real estate, bonds, dividend stocks, a mix of growth and stability that would support me forever. So I retired. Not because I was tired, not because I couldn't work anymore, but because I wanted to, because I could, because I'd built an empire from the ashes of my previous life, and now I wanted to enjoy it. I bought a penthouse in Manhattan with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Central Park. I bought a villa in Tuscany. I bought a beach house in Malibu, not as investments, though they were that too, but as homes, as places to live and be happy. Alexandra and I got married in a small ceremony on a beach in Thailand. Just us, the Hartleys, David and his boyfriend Marcus, and a handful of close friends. It was perfect, simple, genuine ours. To retirement at 28, Alexandra toasted at our reception dinner. And to never having to do anything you don't want to ever again. To freedom, I agreed, and we drank expensive champagne on a private beach as the sun set over the ocean. I was 28 years old, I was retired, I was married to someone I loved who loved me back, I was wealthy beyond imagination, I had avenged myself on my parents by building a life so successful that their rejection meant nothing. This should have been the end of the story, the happy ending where the underdog wins and rides off into the sunset. But life doesn't work that way. 6 months into retirement, I was restless. I'd traveled to 15 countries. I'd learned to paint, to play piano, to scuba dive. I'd eaten at every Michelin star restaurant I'd ever dreamed of. I'd done everything I'd fantasized about during those endless working hours in my previous life. And I was bored. I need a purpose, I told Alexandra one morning. We were in our Manhattan penthouse having breakfast on the terrace. I need to do something that matters. You already do things that matter. Your investment firm has funded dozens of women-owned businesses. That's not enough. I want to help girls like me. Girls who are being exploited by their families, who are being told they're not worth investing in. Alexandra smiled. Then do it. That's how the Emma Hart Foundation was born. I donated $50 million of my own money to create a comprehensive program for teenage girls from abusive or exploitative family situations. We provided everything: legal support to get them out of bad homes, placement in good foster families, therapy to deal with trauma, tutoring to catch up academically, college scholarships, job training, and ongoing mentorship. We didn't just rescue girls. We gave them the tools to build empires of their own. I hired Catherine Winters, a woman I'd met at a charity gala, to run the foundation. She was a former social worker with decades of experience and a fierce dedication to helping vulnerable kids. I want us to be aggressive, Simos, I told her in our first planning meeting. I don't want to wait for girls to ask for help. I want us to find them. Partner with schools, with social workers, with community organizations. Find the girls who are being exploited and offer them a way out. That's going to be expensive, Catherine warned. I don't care. I have more money than I'll ever spend. Let's use it to burn down every system that traps girls the way I was trapped. The foundation launched with a media blitz. I did interviews, wrote op-eds, appeared on talk shows talking about my experience, carefully edited to remove the rebirth element, of course. I talked about being forced to work instead of going to school, about the favoritism toward my sister, about the bruises and the exploitation. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of girls reached out. Hundreds needed immediate help. We scaled up fast, hiring staff, opening satellite offices, partnering with organizations across the country. The first girl we officially helped was Sofia Martinez. She was 14, brilliant at mathematics, and her parents wanted her to quit school to work at their family restaurant. She'd heard about the foundation through her guidance counselor and called our hotline. I went to meet her personally. She was tiny, with dark eyes that were too old for her face, the look of someone who'd been forced to grow up too fast. She reminded me so much of myself that it physically hurt. You don't have to do this, I told her, sitting across from her in a family law office while we waited for CPS to arrive. You don't have to sacrifice your future for anyone. You are valuable, you are brilliant, and you deserve every opportunity. She started crying. My parents say I'm being selfish. They're wrong. Protecting yourself isn't selfish. Wanting an education isn't selfish. They're the ones being selfish by trying to use you. I took her hand. I'm going to help you. We're going to get you into a safe home, get you caught up on school, and get you into the best college you can dream of. And you know what? Someday, when you're successful and happy, they're going to regret treating you this way. But by then, it won't matter because you'll have built something beautiful without them. Sophia went on to become one of our greatest success stories. We got her placed with an excellent foster family, provided her with tutoring and therapy, and helped her navigate the college application process. She graduated high school with a perfect GPA and a full scholarship to Cornell, but she was just the first. Over the next 5 years, we helped 5,000 girls escape exploitation and access education. 5,000 girls who might have ended up like me in my previous life. Broken, used up, dying alone. And then I wrote the book. The Daughter They Discarded was part memoir, part manifesto. I didn't hide anything. I used my parents' real names, named the factory they'd tried to send me to, detailed every instance of abuse and neglect I could remember. I explained how the favoritism toward Melissa had poisoned my childhood, how the exploitation had nearly ruined my life, how I'd escaped only through a combination of luck and determination. I also detailed my success, the investments, the wealth, the retirement at 28. I wanted readers to see the complete arc, from discarded child to self-made multimillionaire. I wanted them to understand that our worth isn't determined by our families, that we can transcend our origins, that we can build something better. My publisher was worried. Emma, this is going to create a firestorm. Are you sure you want to name names? Your family will likely sue. Let them sue. I have documentation of everything. CPS reports, police reports, medical records. Let them try. The book published, and it immediately hit the bestseller list. The backlash against my family was swift and brutal. Melissa lost patience. People didn't want to be treated by a doctor who'd stood by while her sister was abused. The rural clinic where she worked asked her to take a leave of absence, code for we're distancing ourselves from you. Her husband, Tom, who she'd married 3 years prior, filed for divorce, citing the stress and public humiliation. My parents had to move. Someone spray-painted child abusers on their garage door. Their neighbors stopped talking to them. They lost friends, faced harassment, received death threats from internet vigilantes who thought they were doing me a favor. I didn't want them dead. I just wanted them to understand what they'd done. I wanted them to face consequences for once in their miserable lives. And they did. The media ate it up. Family exploitation exposed, how parents sacrificed one daughter to promote another. The girl they threw away built an empire without them. From child labor to tech fortune, Emma Hartley's revenge. Revenge. That's what they called it. And maybe it was. But it was also justice. It was also truth. It was also protection for every other girl who might face the same situation. I appeared on Sector's 60 Minutes to discuss the book and the foundation. Some people say you're being vindictive, the interviewer said, that you're ruining your family's lives to make a point. They ruined their own lives, I replied calmly. I just told the truth about what they did. If the truth ruins them, that's not my fault. It's theirs. Do you have any regrets? I thought about it carefully. I regret that I had parents who saw me as a resource instead of a daughter. I regret that I lost years of my life to exploitation. But I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret building a better life. And I don't regret using my platform to help other girls avoid my fate. The interview went viral. The book sold 3 million copies in 6 months. The foundation received record donations. And my family was destroyed. I should have felt guilty or satisfied or something. But mostly I just felt tired. Alexandra found me on the terrace one night staring out at the Manhattan skyline. Are you okay? Yes, she asked, wrapping her arms around me from behind. I don't know. I thought revenge would feel better than this. Revenge never feels as good as we think it will. But you didn't just get revenge, Emma. You built something bigger. You helped thousands of girls. You changed the conversation about family exploitation. That matters more than what happened to your parents. She was right. But it was hard to remember that when I got the emails. The first one came from Melissa's email address, though I almost deleted it without reading. "Dear Emma," it began, "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even think I deserve it. But I need to say this publicly where everyone can see it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was complicit in your abuse. I'm sorry I benefited from your suffering. I'm sorry I broke my promise to pay you back. I'm sorry for every moment I stood by while our parents treated you like you were worthless. You weren't worthless. You were never worthless. You were brilliant and strong and deserve so much better than what we gave you. I can't undo the past. I can't give you back the childhood we stole, but I can acknowledge it. I can admit that my success was built on your sacrifice, and that's not something to be proud of. I don't want your money. I don't want your help. I just want you to know that I see it now. I see what we did to you, and I'm spending the rest of my life trying to make up for it. I've applied to volunteer with the Emma Hart Foundation. They haven't accepted me yet, understandably, but I'm going to keep trying. I'm offering free medical care to the girls in the program. It's the least I can do. I'll never be able to repay what I owe you, but I can help others like you. That's my penance. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry. Your sister, Melissa. I read it 3 times, looking for the trap, the manipulation, the angle. But it seemed genuine. Melissa had lost everything, her job, her marriage, her reputation. She had nothing left to gain from apologizing. What do you think? I showed the email to Alexandra. She read it carefully. I think she means it. She's lost everything. Now she knows what it feels like. Should I forgive her? Do you want to? I thought about it, really thought about it. No, I said finally. But I'm not going to keep punishing her either. If she wants to volunteer with the foundation, I'll allow it. If she wants to spend her life trying to make amends, that's her choice. But we're not family. We're never going to be family. I forwarded the email to Catherine with a note. If Melissa Hart applies to volunteer, review her application fairly. Don't give her special treatment, but don't reject her just because she's my sister either. Catherine called me an hour later. She's already applied, multiple times actually. Her references are solid. Her patients loved her before the scandal. She's qualified to provide medical care, but Emma, are you sure about this? I'm sure. Let her help. But make it clear that this is about the girls, not about me. She doesn't get access to me. She doesn't get to use this to repair our relationship. She's just another volunteer. Understood. Melissa started volunteering at the foundation 2 weeks later. According to Catherine, she was professional, skilled, and genuinely committed. She worked long hours, provided excellent care to the girls, and never once asked about me. Good. That was exactly what I wanted. My parents tried to contact me several times over the next year. Letters, emails, attempts to reach me through the Hartleys. I ignored all of it. They'd had decades to apologize, to make things right, to be decent parents. The fact that they were only doing it now, that they'd faced consequences, meant nothing. The final letter came from my mother. It was short. Emma, your father and I are moving to Arizona. We wanted you to know. We won't contact you again, but I need to say this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I know you won't believe me, and you have no reason to, but I'm sorry. I hope you find peace. Mom. I deleted it without responding. Peace wasn't something they could give me or take away. I'd found it myself through hard work and strategic investments and sheer stubborn refusal to stay broken. The foundation continued to grow. By the time I was 35, we'd helped 10,000 girls. Sophia, our first rescue, had graduated from Cornell and was working at a nonprofit that helped refugees. She was getting married, and she asked me to walk her down the aisle. I know you're not my mother, she said when she called with the invitation. But you're the closest thing I have to a parent who actually cared about my future. I cried. I'd be honored. The wedding was beautiful. Sophia was radiant in a simple white dress, marrying a kind man who looked at her like she hung the moon. I walked her down the aisle wearing a designer gown that cost more than my parents' annual income. And I thought about how none of this would have happened if I hadn't been reborn, if I hadn't chosen differently. Melissa was there too. She'd been working with the foundation for 5 years by then, quietly contributing, never making waves. We'd never spoken directly. I'd made sure to be absent whenever she was present, but I saw her across the room at the reception. She looked older than she should, worn down by regret and hard work. Our eyes met briefly. She smiled sadly, and I nodded in acknowledgement. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but recognition. She was trying to make amends. That was more than our parents had ever done. At 40, I published another book. Rebirth, How I Transformed Trauma into Triumph, was part memoir, part self-help, part business guide. It detailed my investment strategies, carefully edited to remove the part where I had literal future knowledge, my philosophy on building wealth, and my thoughts on breaking free from family dysfunction. It sold 5 million copies in the first year. The press tour was, exhausting, but exhilarating. Everyone wanted to know my secret. How had I gone from child laborer to multi-millionaire philanthropist? How had I built such a successful investment portfolio? How did I know which companies to bet on? I stuck to my story, pattern recognition, market research, and trusting my instincts. Nobody questioned it too hard because I had the results to back it up. The real secret, I said on one talk show, is that I refused to accept the limitations other people placed on me. My family told me I wasn't smart enough for college. I proved them wrong. Society told me a girl from an abusive home couldn't succeed. I proved them wrong. The market told me certain investments were too risky. I trusted my analysis and proved them wrong. Success isn't about being perfect. It's about being stubborn and strategic. The audience loved it. The video went viral, and somewhere I knew my parents were watching, seeing their daughter, the one they'd thrown away, on national television, talking about her success, her happiness, her empire built on the ashes of their rejection. At 45, I started thinking about legacy beyond the foundation. I'd been retired for 17 years. I'd lived a life of luxury and purpose. I'd saved thousands of girls, made billions of dollars, married the love of my life, and traveled to every corner of the globe. But what came next? I want to teach, I told Alexandra one morning over breakfast in our Tuscany villa. She looked up from her coffee. Teach what? Business, investing, strategy. I want to go to universities and tell young people, especially young women from difficult backgrounds, that they can build wealth and power, that they don't have to accept what their families or society tells them they're worth. You already do that through the foundation, she pointed out. I know, but I want to do it differently, not just helping girls escape bad situations, but teaching women to build empires, to be aggressive, strategic, ruthless when necessary, to take up space and demand respect. I leaned forward, excited. I want to create a pipeline from poverty to power. Alexandra smiled. Then let's do it. We founded the Empire Academy, a free program for women aged 18 to 25 from low-income backgrounds. We taught them everything: finance, negotiation, networking, investing, business strategy, legal protections, psychological resilience. We brought in guest speakers, CEOs, entrepreneurs, investors, women who'd built something from nothing. We provided seed funding for their business ideas. The first cohort had 50 women. Within 5 years, they'd started 32 businesses, and 5 had become millionaires. The program exploded in popularity. We expanded to 10 cities, then 20, then internationally. Thousands of women went through the Empire Academy, and they went on to reshape industries, launch companies, and break glass ceilings everywhere they went. And they all knew who did Allah sits. Given them their start. They all knew my story. At 50, I was more influential than I'd ever dreamed possible. My foundation had helped 50,000 girls. My academy had graduated 10,000 women. My investment firm managed billions in assets. My books had sold tens of millions of copies worldwide. I'd won, completely, utterly, definitively. And then my mother died. The notification came through a social worker. Your mother has terminal cancer. She has approximately 3 months to live. She's requested to see you. I could have ignored it. I probably should have ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I flew to Arizona on my private jet and drove a rental car to the modest apartment where my parents had been living for the past decade. Dad answered the door. He was 75 now, bent and gray and diminished. He looked shocked to see me, like he hadn't really believed I'd come. She's in the bedroom, he said quietly, his voice hoarse. Mom looked like a skeleton. The cancer had eaten away at her, leaving behind something fragile and small. She was nothing like the formidable woman who dominated my childhood, the one who'd stood by while Dad hit me, the one who'd told me I wasn't worth investing in. Emma, she whispered, you came. The social worker said you wanted to talk. I stayed by the door, maintaining distance. I'm dying. I know. I need... She coughed, a wet, painful sound. I need to tell you that you were right. About everything. I said nothing, just waited. We should never have made you quit school. We should never have forced you to work. We should have loved you as much as we loved Melissa. Tears leaked from her eyes. I thought we were making a practical choice. I thought we were doing what was best for the family, but we were just cowards who took the easy path. Yes, I agreed, you were. Can you forgive me? I looked at this dying woman, this person who'd shaped my first life into something so painful that I'd died bitter and alone at 48. The person who, in this life, had tried to do the same thing but failed because I'd remembered, because I'd fought back. No, I said calmly, I can't forgive you, but I don't hate you anymore either. You're just a sad old woman who made bad choices. And now you're dying with those choices. She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. That's more than I deserve. Yes, it is. I turned to leave. Emma, wait. Please. She reached out a trembling hand. Please tell me. Tell me you're happy. Tell me that even though we failed you, you managed to build a good life. I looked back at her. At this woman who'd given birth to me but had never been a mother. This woman who'd chosen favorites and lived to regret it. I'm 50 years old. I retired at 30. I have a wife I love, friends who value me, and a legacy that will outlive both of us. I've helped thousands of women escape situations like the one you tried to trap me in. I'm worth over $1 billion, and I'm happy, genuinely, deeply happy. She smiled through her tears. Good, that's good. But you don't get credit for it. My happiness, my success, my life, none of it is because of you. It's all in spite of you. I opened the door. Goodbye, Mom. She died 2 weeks later. I didn't go to the funeral. Melissa called me afterward. She asked for you at the end. She kept saying your name. I know, I visited her before she died. A pause. You did? Yes. She asked for forgiveness. I said no. I could hear Melissa's sharp intake of breath. Did you expect a different answer? I don't know. I hoped maybe... Melissa, she had 50 years to apologize, to make amends, to be a decent mother. She only did it when she was dying and wanted to feel better about herself. That's not repentance, that's just fear of death. She still loved you, Melissa said quietly. In her own way. Her way was harmful and selfish. That's not love. I softened my tone slightly. How are you doing? I'm okay, tired, sad. She hesitated. Dad wants to know if you'll help with funeral costs. I laughed. I couldn't help it. No, he has a daughter who's a doctor. He can ask her. Emma, I can't afford... Then he can have a simple funeral. Or he can dip into whatever savings they have. But he's not getting money from me. Not for this, not for anything. A long pause. Then surprisingly, you're right, I'll figure it out. We hung up. I felt nothing, no guilt, no sadness, just a mild annoyance that they were still trying to extract value from me, even in death. At 55, Melissa died. The article appeared in a medical journal first. Dr. Melissa Hart, pioneer of rural medicine, passes at 70. She died of a stroke while working at a free clinic in Appalachia. She'd been providing medical care to people who couldn't afford it for the past 15 years. She'd never remarried, never had children. She'd lived simply, donated most of her income to charity, and worked until the day she died. The article mentioned her volunteer work with the Emma Hart Foundation, how she'd provided free medical care to thousands of at-risk girls. It mentioned her public apology to me, her lifetime of attempting to make amends for benefiting from my exploitation. Dr. Hart spent her final years trying to help others avoid the situation her sister faced. The article concluded, she will be remembered as a dedicated physician who spent her life in service to others. I sat with the news for a long time, trying to figure out how I felt. Sad? She'd been my sister, even if we'd never really known each other. Relieved? She was gone. One more connection to my painful past severed. Satisfied? She'd spent years trying to atone, had lost everything, had died working for others. Mostly, I just felt tired. Are you going to the funeral? Alexandra asked gently. No, but I'll make a donation to the clinic where she worked, a large one. Anonymous. That's kind of you. It's not for her, it's for the people she was helping. The people who remind me of me. I donated $5 million to the rural clinic. They used it to expand their services, hire more doctors, provide free care to even more people. Melissa would have liked that, I thought. She'd spent her final years actually helping people, not just talking about it. Maybe that was her own rebirth, not literal, like mine, but metaphorical. She'd been reborn from the selfish child who'd benefited from my exploitation into someone who actually cared about others. It had taken her entire life, and she'd died in the process of that transformation, but she'd done it. That was more than our parents had ever managed. At 60, I was still retired, still happy, still winning. I'd outlived my mother, I'd outlived my sister, I'd outlived almost everyone who'd hurt me in my first life. The foundation had helped 90,000 girls over the past 30 years. The Academy had graduated 25,000 women. My books had sold over 50 million copies worldwide, translated into 40 languages. My investment firm managed over 10 billion in assets, and I was still going, but I was also slowing down, stepping back, letting others take the lead. I'd built something sustainable, something that would continue long after I was gone. The directors I'd trained were brilliant and passionate. They didn't need me anymore. So I stepped down from the day-to-day operations and focused on what I wanted. Painting, music, travel, time with Alexandra, afternoons with David and his family, evenings with the Hartleys, who were in their late 80s now but still sharp and loving. We're so proud of you, Sarah told me on her 90th birthday. We were at her party, surrounded by decades of foster children she'd helped, all of whom had come to celebrate the woman who'd given them a chance. You saved me, I said, hugging her. Both of you saved me. No, James said, joining the hug. You'd say, you saved yourself. We just gave you a safe place to land. At 65, I wrote my final book. The Art of the Second Chance was part memoir, part philosophy. In it, I finally revealed something close to the truth, that I'd had a moment of clarity when I was 14 that changed everything. That I'd seen the path my life would take if I didn't fight back, and I'd chosen differently. I couldn't say I'd literally been reborn, but I could say I'd been given a chance to start over, and I'd taken it. The book became my best-selling work yet. People love the idea of reinvention, of choosing differently, of refusing to accept the limitations others placed on them. At the book launch, a young woman approached me. She was maybe 19, with scared eyes and bruises on her wrists that looked familiar. My parents want me to quit college to help with their business, she said quietly. But I read your book and I want to choose differently too. I gave her the foundation's card. Call this number. Tell them Emma sent you. They'll help you. She started crying. Thank you so much. I watched her walk away, and I thought about the girl I'd been. The one who died alone at 48, the one who'd been given an impossible gift and used it to burn down the world that hurt her and build something better from the ashes. She'd be proud, I thought. She'd be so fucking proud. At 70, I was still retired, still happy, still free. They'd sent me to work at 14 so Melissa could study. After Rebirth, I retired at 30, and Melissa worked until she died. I'd won. But more than that, I'd helped 90,000 girls win too. I'd helped 25,000 women build empires. I'd changed the conversation about family exploitation and created systems to protect vulnerable children. Revenge had been sweet, but legacy was sweeter, and I lived happily ever after.